Very interested to know more about the relationship that you think that exists between cinema and philosophy.
Usual cinema is ignoring philosophy, maybe with the exception of Terence Malick and maybe with the exception of Godard and some others, because usually cinema is trying to sort of create a completely hermetic narration, which by the end of the day is simply over and no question is left unanswered. Whereas philosophy is not about finding valid answers, but about finding valid ways of thought that will keep the question alive and still enrich the life of those who read the philosophy. So there's a relationship that's basically kind of controversial. On the other hand, cinema, as it's such a medium that can go so deeply into the soul and body of the viewer because of the grip we have on images, on sound, on rhythm, on everything with the viewer, we can basically throw the viewer deeply into philosophical questions, which is rarely used, but which I'm trying to do.
I wonder if you wanted to somehow criticize this aspect of philosophy with your work?
I mean, your question is complicated. On the one hand, it's clear. Heidegger was a Nazi, and his biography is a disaster. That's clear. On the other hand, some of his thoughts are very, very valid even today. Because, for instance, the thought that if human mankind looks upon the creation and world just as a source of resources, of sort of things you can buy and use, then we lose the contact with the world. So that kind of thought is very valid. Now, as for the radical quality of philosophy, for me, that's the real value of philosophy. We are living in a society where we are used to thinking only in terms of how to reach which goal. This is just a purely operational thinking. This is as if you were walking the stairs and you were just thinking about how can I get to the next step without thinking about where the fuck do I want to go to. So the radical approach of philosophy, which says we are trying to search for truth, and wherever it leads us, that is where it leads us, and it's not important whether that is where we wanted to go or where we didn't want to go. That is actually the valuable part of philosophy. And of course, to the two of them, it happens that it leads them somewhere where they did not want to go, definitely not, and even where the film does not want to go. But what happens in the end is that radical present tense is breaking into their concept of time. This is something we all know when we have heavy accidents in a car, in a bicycle, in the mountains. There's a moment when reality and present time breaks into our concept of time, and there is no longer future, past, present. It's just the moment, and we are trying to get to control it, and we do not succeed. That's what the reality of time is compared to our concept of time.
How did you find the actors for that could portray or represent the role that you are thinking about with so much dimension?
So difficult. I don't want to appear megalomaniac, but I think we cast each and every German-speaking person who applied to acting school for like 2 years, more or less. In the end, we had maybe 4,000 or 5,000 young actors we had seen. Whoever young actor in Germany you meet now and you ask them, have you been cast for the role of Robert? The answer would probably be yes, and probably they will be kind of pissed off for not having had the role, of course. Casting twins means that you have to find a closed universe of energy that is bundled together. It has nothing to do with looking similar, with being of similar height or hair color or whatever. It has to do with energy, and that's incredibly hard to find. And I was very lucky to find those two who don't look identical at all. I mean, he's very tall and black hair, and she's very blonde and very small. In fact, the first time they met, after this casting, both of them said, I don't want to play that role with that person. I don't want to. I don't like him. And for me that was a good sign, because I had the feeling, all right, they're already entering into a personal relationship because they don't like each other. And then it changed entirely, because usually actors are always saying, oh yes, I would be flattered to play with that and that person because they want that role. So if an actor says, not with him, then that's a good start.
I think of German cinema, seeing such kind of radical is very rare. You can see such kind of movie in French cinema, but in German cinema, especially because of the way, I think that the tradition that exists in the society, seeing such kind of movie was rare.
I don't want to talk badly about my colleagues, but and I don't feel as part of German cinema anyway. This is the very first time I ever opened a film in Germany. I've always opened my film in Switzerland or in Italy or in Sundance, and there's a reason for that. I feel that German cinema has become very cautious in its approach to psychological issues, and also very, very cautious, even cautious to the extent of being mediocre in the approach to what is an image. I think if you don't have images that are strong enough to fill a screen, you might just as well stay out of the cinema. This applies to the largest part of German cinema, unfortunately. So I think you're right. There's a radicalism here that you don't find in German cinema usually. In fact, you find it everywhere else. When you look at Asian cinema, when you look at Italian cinema, when you look at Norwegian cinema, when you look at cinema worldwide, when you look at Argentine, South American cinema, I mean, things of incredible radical quality are happening all over the world, and Germany somehow seems to have missed the train, maybe?
About the location, how long did the shooting take place, and some specific information about
This is an interesting question. I mean, the location was, I searched for the location with a couple of location scouts. We basically went to every country road in the south of Germany, everyone. And because the premises were quite clear, I wanted mountains in the background, because mountains for humankind are always a symbol of home. Because when you have mountains behind where there's snow on the top, that means in the deep instincts of us, we will always have water, even in the summer. That's why mountains in the back are a symbol of this is a home. And I wanted a winding road that leads away from a gas station with no houses, no villages, nothing to be seen all around the horizon. Incredibly hard to find in Europe. Once we found that location, we started constructing that gas station. It's completely built, all of it. The tree that's behind it is completely built. I mean, when they take Eric prisoner, they sit there in front of the table. You remember?
Yeah.
And you see through the back window this sort of tilted tree. You know, that of course is something that has been built. I mean, we put the tree there in order to have the window there, and then we put a huge opening into the wall behind the bench on which the two of them are sitting, in order to place the camera behind it. All of these things are sort of devised for those images. And in fact, we shot from August to November, which is hard to believe.
Oh, okay. And what did you do with season changing?
We planted all the seeds. All the fields you see around us are planted by us, and the colors are controlled by the art director, Alexander Manasse, who also did Run Lola Run and other famous films. We actually spray, we sort of changed, we dyed the field at a certain moment. In October we had to start dyeing them and sort of using organic paint, which was water resistant still, to keep that golden color of the fields. And we did all of that, and we had to talk with the farmers and sort of ask them to plant certain seeds, and it was a very, very complicated process, because keeping the colors stable and telling a story that's 48 hours in the summer basically is impossible. And luckily we found two scientists. When I called them up first, they said, what you want to do, Mr. Groening, is completely impossible. We love your films, but what you want is impossible. They called me back a week later and said, we thought about it. We still think it's impossible, but we would like to try to help you, because this would be the first time that people succeed in doing it. So let's try it at least.
That you also work as a DOP for the film. Is it easy to be director and at the same time DOP? And how did you, for example, that works with, for example, acting directions? Can you do both simultaneously?
I work less as a filmmaker, maybe, in a certain sense, and more as like a painter, you know. So I use the camera like a paintbrush. A painter will never know exactly before what kind of movement they do. So it's hard for me to give that to somebody else. I have a fantastic team that I had also on the other film, on Police Officer's Wife. The same guy who does the light, who's the chief electrician, who does the light design. I mean, building that gas station meant we had all the lamps hanging underneath the ceiling, already prepared for certain light things. And for instance, when you when you look at the station, at the scenes inside the station, there's always a very certain sunlight. The station was built in such a way that in August the sunlight was still coming from a certain angle, and later on we could simply hang very big lamps under that steel construction, the roof, and sort of continue with that exactly same light. So that was a lot of work in the preparation, and during the shoot, as we are a good team, that took very little of my energy, because I would tell Amir, look, we need this and this and that. Now for the actors, I used to think that it's very important to look at the actors not through the camera but through simply eye to eye.
Yeah.
I've changed my opinion on that. I think after 2 films of working this way, I got used to judging the actor's performance through the camera, which is a change, of course. In a certain way, it's a change, but it's something that appears to work. And then I work in a very non-normal way, sort of. On the set, we're 7 people. Yesterday, all those 7 people were there, and we celebrated together. So we started to count how many people are we actually on set when we shoot, and it's exactly 7 people who are doing more than one function at a time. I mean, like the girl who's doing the props, whenever I need a 3rd camera, she will take the 3rd camera and pan it. The chief electrician will pan a camera. The camera assistant will pan a camera. The makeup lady will do the wardrobe at the same time. And it's a very, very small team of people who are all completely devoted to making the film happen. And that gives this intimacy that actors need. I think it's very hard to act in front of a 50-people crew. And I think you see it in most movies. Whereas acting in front of a group of 7 people who are really like a small universe protecting intimacy, that's a different process.
Okay.